On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is TalkTV.
Tonight on Piers Morgan Uncensored, with me, Richard Tice.
And me, Isabel Oakeshott.
So, the revenge of the Ramonas. After the secret summits, the cosy cross-party chats, is there a Valentine's plot to unravel the Brexit divorce? I'll ask one of the EU's not-so-secret admirers, Lord Heseltine.
And spy balloons, stealth social media apps and investments worth hundreds of billions in critical infrastructure. Is it time to wake up to China's threat to the West? We'll debate that.
Plus, the experimental gender clinic where 1,000 British children, some aged just 10 years old, were given powerful puberty-blocking drugs. Did fears over the toxic trans debate cause the horrific Tavistock scandal?
Live from London, this is Piers Morgan Uncensored with Richard Tice and Isabel Oakeshott.
Welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored, and tonight we have a bit of a Valentine's special. The big question we're going to be asking is, after a very messy breakup, what exactly is the state of our relationship with the EU? It's 4 years since we told Brussels we wanted a divorce. Now, what followed was pretty typical of all big breakups. A lot of hurt, a lot of anger, and a lot of expensive lawyers. The big hope, of course, was that when the nasty paperwork was all finished, and that would take another 2 years, by the way, for us to get out, we'd all be able to move on. And very soon we'd strike up new, more rewarding and exciting relationships with other countries. Unfortunately, it seems some people are still nursing a broken heart. All they want to do is go back to what many people who voted for Brexit feel was at best a very dysfunctional relationship with Brussels. The question is, are shadowy figures in government and the civil service conspiring to rekindle the romance? Was that rendezvous in Ditchley Park where Remainers like Peter Mandelson and David Lammy flirted with Leavers like Michael Gove the beginning of an illicit affair that they hope will lead to something more serious?
Well, joining us now are former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe, TalkTV contributor Paul Rowan-Adrian, plus former Deputy Prime Minister down the line, Lord Heseltine. Good evening to you all. Lord Heseltine, thank you for joining us on Piers Morgan Uncensored. We really appreciate it. So we've only just actually left the trading relationship just over 2 years ago. It's the beginning of a long-term new relationship, and yet already it seems that some people are trying to sort of bring us back ever closer together. I know that was always your view. Were you invited to this conference?
No.
Well,
Would you like to have been?
So you feel you missed out. But in terms of where we are...
I don't feel I missed out at all.
OK, well, in terms of where we are, since we left
Yes.
the trading relationship, we've got our trade with the EU is actually up some 10% since the end of the transition period. It's up some 40% since the end of 2016. Our foreign direct investment since 2016 is about the highest of any European nation, well comparable. So it seems to me that people are sort of, they're essentially sort of talking down Brexit before actually it's been given a chance to maximise the opportunity.
Well, if the figures that you've just given were accurate, why are people so upset? Why is there a concern? I mean, you just depicted a triumph. Now, let me just sort of help you a little. You see, it's not the people like me. Did you see today's Telegraph? Brexit is dead.
Yes, I did. That was
and
an
those
article.
are your most fanatical supporters. So
that's right.
How can your greatest supporters allow this sort of adverse propaganda be published?
That was an article by Cheryl Jacobs, Lord Heseltine. But the point is, what she was concerned about is that the establishment figures...
Let's start again. What about this one? The Bank of England. People £1,000 worse off. The Daily Telegraph. It's not me. It's your friends.
The reality is that our GDP growth...
The reality, I've just told you what the reality is. I've just told you what the reality is.
No, the reality is the figures, Lord Heseltine,
trying to delude people
show...
as you've been doing for 6 years. How can you dare to say that it's only 2 years or 4 years? The referendum was
because that's
in
a question of fact, Lord Heseltine. It is only 2 years
nearly
since the end of the
7
relationship.
years ago. And the people who were in charge in the government of the day, Boris Johnson, Liam Fox, David Davis, did you think they knew what they were doing? 2 years before we had a general election. Then we were told we'd get Brexit done. Why now? Are we still waiting to know what that means? I'll tell you why. Because it meant a pack of lies.
Well, Lord Heseltine, let me tell you why. The reason that we're in the position we are is because Remainers such as yourself worked very, very hard to thwart Brexit ever happening. So you can recite the many years since 2016 but we've had no time to actually make it work.
You've had 6 years with your hands on the levers of power.
Well, we'd love to have had 6 years.
Don't tell me it's people like me or civil servants.
OK, Lord Heseltine, bear with us a second.
Doing?
Let's come to our panel. Anne, many people say that we've got Brexit in name only. What's your view of that? Where do you think we are in terms of the journey and the opportunity?
Well, I certainly think we're not taking advantage of the opportunities that are available to us. That is the first thing. Secondly, those opportunities are limited by the agreement that was reached, which was, I think, Brexit in name only. But even so, we have got some freedoms that we could use, and we're not using them. And that is why people are so disappointed. Also, of course, things have been conflated. You know, we've got inflation largely as a result of huge spending during COVID. It's not just confined to Britain. It's in other countries as well. But everybody says, you know, post-Brexit, therefore on account of Brexit. And that is a nonsense argument. And, I mean, with all due respect to Lord Heseltine, he'll know I'm a huge admirer of Lord Heseltine, but he's just got this one completely wrong. We have not had 6 years. We've only been legally out for 2.
I think that's a very valid point, Anne Widdecombe. But do you think we Brexiteers, and of course I was also a very vocal supporter of Brexit, would we do well to acknowledge that thus far it hasn't been a triumph? We have to kind of accept that bit,
It
right?
isn't that Brexit hasn't been a triumph. It's that how we have handled Brexit hasn't been a triumph. That deal, which we all warned was flawed right from the start, is at the root of a great many of the problems that we have. Brexit isn't to blame. What we are doing, or rather what we are not doing with Brexit, is to blame.
I can see Paula.
Paula, if you're going to do a job...
Yes.
Let's do it properly.
Yes.
And let's give it a fair time.
Yes.
In order to show itself.
Absolutely.
That's it. We finished with you now.
But you can't do that if the foundation upon which you are working is false. Is faulty.
Which bit?
And that premise was made on a lie. It was built on a lie. We lied to those of us in the East End. We lied to those of us up north. We lied to the fishermen.
Sovereignty is not false.
We lied to those concerned about immigration.
Who's this
Who's we?
Those
I
who
didn't lie
pushed
to
for
anybody.
Brexit.
I pushed for Brexit.
Lied about what was going to happen in relation
Nonsense.
to immigration. Lied about what was going to happen to the NHS and how it was going to be cared for. And we know that because we are paying the price. Is it true? Well, then let's flip it round. Is it true that the NHS are now receiving £350 million
Actually,
a week?
it's receiving a lot more. It's receiving way more. But you Remainers just do not want to accept the real facts.
That we were inundated by Turkish immigrants who wanted to come and settle here? Was that true?
Look, I think the point...
Is it true that we were able to regain control of our borders?
And the truth is, we've had the highest immigration in the year to June 22 ever.
Because you didn't regain control of the borders in the way that you
could have
promised that you would do.
We could have done, but this Conservative government...
Coulda, woulda, shoulda. That is not the way to win something as important as making us leave.
If we've still got Lord Heseltine here, I would like to ask him whether he thinks that the voters were sold a pack of lies.
Is that yes, isn't it?
What are you going to say to that?
Absolutely.
You think absolutely that was the case. So what was a lie as far as you were concerned?
Can I just answer the question?
Please.
They were sold a pack of lies, yes. And the greatest evidence of that is that 6 years later, when the Brexiteers have been in charge, we have not seen any of the benefits that we were told we would get. And that's because they were all fiction.
So I think your 6 years is fictional. You can't justify that 6 years.
Total fiction.
Forgive me, let us be pedantic on this one matter. Did the referendum take place in 2016?
Yes, but we didn't leave
Is
in
that
2016.
6 years?
Lord Heseltine, the end of the story... Lord Heseltine, you know fully...
So, look, can we just stop?
Lord Heseltine, can we just agree
will you
at the
please,
end of the relationship...
Will you please allow me to answer the questions you've put to me? In 2016... a government was formed in which Boris Johnson, David Davis and Liam Fox, the principal advocates of Brexit, were put in charge of the three most important departments. So they were there 6.5 years ago.
And Lord Heseltine, we left 2 years ago. I'm going to ask one final question to you, Lord Heseltine, before we let you go.
Yes.
Would you rejoin the EU, or would you get on with doing the job properly?
I would get a job done properly by rejoining the European Union.
So then, Lord Heseltine, you're going to negotiate the worst possible deal with no leverage. How ridiculous. I thought you were a successful businessman.
I am a successful businessman.
Well, then you know that would be a terrible negotiation.
It's a disaster. I love your interruptions. You see, you won't let me answer the questions because you can't bear the truth. And so you shout me down.
We're listening.
Let me tell you frankly, you never listen. That's your whole problem. You just interrupt so that anyone who talks something you don't like, you try to shout them down. And, I mean, we dealt with the issue a few minutes ago. What was the motive of Boris Johnson's electoral victory? Get Brexit done. So why hasn't it happened?
Because people like you thwarted it.
Because the promises. You see, there you are, interrupting again. Exactly
it's a conversation,
People like
Lord
me,
Heseltine. It's a conversation, not a monologue.
No, this is not a shout. This is a shouting match in which your technique is to shout down anyone you disagree with. You do it all the time.
And your technique is to lecture me.
I knew perfectly well.
Your technique is to patronise and lecture me.
I knew when I came on this programme I would have to behave in a way that I deplore and to fight, get a word in edgeways, because you think that if you can censor what people are saying by shouting them down, you'll win the argument.
Lord Heseltine,
you'll never win the argument with me that way.
We're very grateful for your time, but the truth is you've actually spoken more than anybody else.
I bet you're not.
Thank you very much indeed, Lord Heseltine, for your thoughts. And by the way, just to clarify, it's only 2 years since the end of the trading relationship.
You're off again. You've got trying to get the last word. I know the tricks.
Came out too. We remember.
Just finally, Paula, before we conclude this piece, Lord Heseltine would rejoin tomorrow. Would you rejoin tomorrow?
And can I answer that in as long a time as you can give me? George Eustace told us how things have gone wrong. He finally admitted how things had gone wrong. And I have my friends and family in the East End who can tell you how it's gone wrong. We have the fishermen who can tell you how it's gone wrong. We have those up north who tell you how it's gone wrong. We can have those who are sitting in Calais.
You haven't asked the question.
I say get it done properly.
Would you get it properly?
Do it done properly. It's voted, get it done properly.
Yep.
Next tonight, are US-China tensions about to explode over spy balloons, and how scared should we be?
Passionate and always straight to the point. World-class broadcaster Vanessa Feltz is on TalkTV every night of the week. From politics to pop culture, there's no subject she shies away from. And remember,
if you're thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Join Vanessa Feltz on TalkTV every day from 4 p.m. He's back, and he's uncensored. Debating the breaking news and talking to the biggest names. Piers Morgan is live every week with a host of stars. Uncompromising, unmissable, and uncensored. And remember,
if you're thinking it, we're talking about it.
Piers Morgan Uncensored, Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on TalkTV.
Britain's conversation. Oh no. With the People's Channel. No, already used. Every little helps. For God's sake, is nothing original anymore. It's finger-licking good. I'm loving it. Look, let's be honest. We don't have any fancy speechwriters here, but we do, and I promise you, discuss the issues that matter to you. Yes, I'm back. Talk TV, not with Morgan, just before him. Monday to Thursday at 7 p.m. Join me. Just do it. Well, that one too.
Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Well, just before we move on to talk about China, I do think we need to just catch up on that extraordinary debate and interaction with Lord Heseltine.
Yeah, I mean, Lord Heseltine, I did expect him to, to be pretty punchy. He is, after all, an arch Ramona.
He was completely brilliant. I thought he was.
We'll come to you in a minute, Stanley, because we know you share the same view. But look, the reality is that he keeps using the word lies, but he couldn't admit that it was only...
that was Paula as well.
Both of them. But Lord Heseltine couldn't admit that it was only 2 years since the end of the trade election.
I mean, I think we've got to completely nail this 6 years thing. Absolutely ridiculous. They keep on using it, don't they? As if the more they say it, the more true it'll become.
Hey, I've got to tell you, Heseltine nailed you two. He did a brilliant job.
Welcome to the show to Stanley Johnson, who we're going to talk now about China, because we can be reasonably sure that aliens were not indeed responsible for the 4 unidentified flying objects that were shot down in the last few days over America. China, despite official denials, is of course suspected of launching balloons to spy on our American friends. The first one travelled across the US before being shot down on the 4th of February off the coast of South Carolina. And a further 3 objects were taken out in the last few days. A former head of MI6 today said the West is under the full press of Chinese espionage. And next week, world leaders are gathering in Munich for a major security conference. And they'll be connecting their mobile phones to, you guessed it, telecoms infrastructure provided by none other than Beijing telecoms giant Huawei.
Well, joining us is the author, campaigner and China fan, Stanley Johnson. You may say that's fair or unfair. We'll come to that. And best-selling author Douglas Murray, who's joining us from New York. We will, I think, first of all, we will have to come to you, Stanley.
So keen to get involved in the debate.
Look, Stanley, the bottom line is here. put it simply, the Chinese are spying on our allies. We've probably got to assume that they are spying on us too. Are you now embarrassed at your stance of being so pro-Chinese?
I'm not at all embarrassed. Absolutely not. Look at the debate you just had with Lord Heseltine. Here we are, an isolated country, more or less losing our friends in Europe. We are not in a good shape as far as Russia is concerned.
So let's cosy up to the Chinese.
Can we really afford to develop a hostile relationship with China? I think not now. You asked your point. Am I a Sinophile? Well, in 1961, I tried to ride a motorcycle from Oxford to Peking. We got to the Chinese border. I'm going to finish that journey off this summer. I've been in China. I think I was the first EU delegation to go to China in 1975 when Mao was still in charge. I've been there lots of times. One of my sons was educated, not Boris, by the way, not one of my younger sons was educated in Tsinghua University.
But you haven't answered the question. They're spying on us, Stanley.
Well, we're spying on them. And that is the nature. However, I happen to believe that if the Chinese say this is a meteorological, let's wait until they're disproved. We have satellites. I'm not sure Britain has satellites, but the US certainly has satellites. We certainly have all signs of.
Are we floating balloons over Beijing?
Well, that's a pretty antiquated form. It might be totally appropriate for British technology to have a few balloons. We probably, the French could do it with Monsieur Blériot. No, I think the real tragedy of the whole thing is just at the moment when Mr. Blinken, Antony Blinken, was about to go to China to, as it were, reset a relationship which had been slightly knocked off kilter by Mrs. Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Just at that moment, this unfortunate episode occurred and the balloon floated over North Carolina. Yeah, let's move on. That's my line.
This seems an awful lot of apologist waffle to me, with apologies from me for saying that to you. I mean, you seem to be actively proud of cozying up to Beijing.
We're all cozying up to Beijing. If you look at the trade figures, we cozy up to Beijing every day. You just pointed out all the things we use every day, all the things which we buy from China every day. And by the way, in the world I do, you very kindly, I think, introduced me as an author. Well, one of the things I do is write books about the environment. I campaign. That's the campaigning part on the environment. Without China, a lot of the work we do on the big environmental issues would go down the drain.
I'm sure that's true. I'm not sure they're being terribly helpful. Can I just let's just establish just how close your relationship is with the Chinese. How often have you been in and out of the Chinese embassy here in London?
Well, you could probably get some records of that.
I'm asking you the question now. How often have you been in and out quite a few times?
The first time was in 1961, when I was trying to get a visa to go.
All right, let's not go way back to 60.
No, I don't think. Well,
is it 10 times, 20 times?
Oh, not as many as that. But I have certainly been. I went to the Chinese embassy, had a very good conversation with the then Chinese ambassador, just in the run-up to COVID, and that I think was on the record.
Right.
Just in the run-up to COVID.
So you've been in and out quite a few times.
Well, I think you might say 3 or 4 times over the period of time.
Right.
And that I think is perfectly legitimate.
And do you make any money at all from any companies?
No, I don't at all. I'm very happy
to say. Not one penny?
No, not one penny. Not one penny. I work as only in an honorary capacity, and by the way, this is tremendously important. It makes my point, actually, about the whole thing about China and the relationship. I work as an advisor to the Chinese non-governmental organization called Eco Forum Global, which is working to try and put in place a world coastal forum, and that is crucially important.
Very worthy.
Sounds all very worthy, but the reality is they're spying on us. They haven't got our best interests in heart. Let's bring in Douglas Murray in New York. Douglas, very good evening. Thanks for being with us. Look, how serious should we take this threat? Stanley Johnson has just said it's sort of old technology, this spying balloon. But geopolitically, what's really going on here, and how should the Western allies respond?
Well, first of all, we're learning on a day-by-day basis more and more about this, and the American government has been perhaps understandably coy about exactly what it is that's been going on and what they've shot down and what they've intercepted and what they've indeed missed so far. The balloon that first caused attention was, of course, described by the Communist Party of China as simply being a weather balloon that had gone astray, a story which absolutely nobody believed. And you could only spin if, like the Communist Party that rules China, you're used to just asserting things and not having to prove them to anyone's satisfaction. Beijing tried this line. Nobody was convinced. Although there have been people, as I'm sorry to hear Stanley Johnson just play this trick himself. I think it's quite a disgraceful thing to do, to say, oh, well, we spy on them, they spy on us. Here's just one of the many differences. Western satellite technologies have indeed been used to look at, for instance, the concentration camp network operated by the Chinese Communist Party in the Xinjiang province. That isn't anything like what the Chinese were trying to do with America. Chinese were flying balloons over, for instance, American atomic bases. So this isn't anything like parity. As for the larger question of our relationship with China, nobody wants war with China, but we are in an increasingly dangerous standoff thanks to the behaviour of Beijing. Just look at what Stanley just mentioned has happened in the last few years. Look at what happened with COVID. China crashed the entire global economy by, at the very most benign explanation, not telling the world that an incredibly infectious respiratory disease was coming out of Wuhan. Right. It did everything it could to cover that over. And you get up to more recent times, they have the gall to threaten a Democrat, a Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, for asserting her right to go to Taiwan. This comes after years of threatening British officials, perhaps something we should get into. Douglas. Because anyone who pretends that what we're dealing with the CCP is a sort of benign operator can't possibly have their spectacles on.
Douglas Murray, can I ask, are you on TikTok?
No, absolutely not. TikTok
and Stanley, are you on TikTok?
Not as far as
I know. Do you think that we're naive about social media apps like TikTok? There have been some concerns expressed that it's not all as it seems with TikTok.
I'm not sure
TikTok
I know what
is
TikTok
a piece.
is.
TikTok, I do. TikTok, I wrote the first piece in the British press about this after interviewing then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in The Sun several years ago. TikTok is a piece of Chinese malware, which is a data harvesting entity, among many other things. It's not permitted to be operated in China. It is used in the West to collect data from young people in the West. Anybody watching who has TikTok or whose children have TikTok, take it off your phone.
Douglas,
you are not the user of the product, you are the product.
Let's just, we've just got a clip on TikTok. Let's just watch this.
It always blows my mind when I look at, the number of people who use TikTok. I mean, I'm one of them, right? You use the sort of videos. Are we being a bit
Sophie,
naive?
get off it! Stop it!
Are we being naive? Are we? I'm worried now.
We are being naive. So look, TikTok gave evidence to my committee where they said that there was no way that individuals working in China could get access to the data of Britons. But what we've now seen is that people working in China for TikTok hacked into European data so they could track down the source of a journalist.
Stanley, I know you're itching to come in here. I mean, you've actually travelled out to the province, haven't you? Or you were intending to travel to the province where the Uyghur crimes have taken place. How are you comfortable with that?
You're using words which,
Oh, you don't think the treatment of the Uyghurs is criminal?
No, I'm not getting into that.
Why not?
Getting into that.
Why not? It's hugely important.
I tell you why. Why? Isabel, the journey I'm going to do is to refollow the steps of Marco Polo in China in the 13th century. And it's a bridge-building exercise. And I want to make a point here, because all of you, the people on the far right of the Conservative Party...
Excuse me, I don't think either of us are on the far right, just to be clear.
Even more right, then. What we're trying to do, I think, is not whip up the temperature on China. That is not the game.
Is that what you'd say to the Uyghurs?
It is a big, big mistake to whip up the game, and I'm certainly not going to play that game. I think I'm there for bridge building. That is the point.
And so you're just going to blinker yourself to the mistreatment of the Uyghur Muslims. You're just going to ignore that because it's inconvenient to you.
Well, hold on. I don't know what I'm going to see. Do I know what I'm going to see?
Well, you haven't even researched that. You haven't researched the human rights abuses.
Everything is there. I've read the reports of the UN rapporteur. I've read them, and that is.
And you're still comfortable with that?
Well, who is not? Are you comfortable buying Chinese food, buying Chinese products?
That's different to national security interests. Let's go back to to Douglas. How do you respond to Stanley Johnson's sort of view of the Uyghurs that it's irrelevant to the broader picture?
I didn't say that.
Look, Stanley has his own. Stanley Johnson has his own game he's playing. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but it's obviously not an investigative game. We can say that at the very least, can't we? I mean, you don't have to know exactly what's happening in Xinjiang, although I would if I were you. You can just look at what the CCP's done to our friends in Hong Kong over the last decade. Just look at what it's doing with its overflights into territorial airspace of the Taiwanese. Look at its assistance to Moscow. Go back 10 years. If Stanley doesn't care about our allies like America and its treatment by the CCP, and doesn't care about the people of Hong Kong, doesn't care about the people of Xinjiang, and so on, perhaps you could care about the way in which the Chinese government has treated the government of our own country. 10 years ago, the then Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron had the gall to meet with the Dalai Lama. He met with Nick Clegg as well, the Deputy Prime Minister. After
I
that
go back.
happened,
I'm sorry, Douglas.
May I please finish my point?
May
I please finish my point, because it's very important. It's better than the waffle you're going to get from Stanley. The Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, after having the gall to meet the Dalai Lama, were informed that there would be no more trade negotiations with Beijing. They were put in the freezer, those negotiations, until there was a formal apology by the British government, which at the next meeting with their Chinese counterparts was pushed across the table, and the British diplomats were asked to stand up, read the apology, and were told, "We just wanted to know you meant it." So that's how the Chinese have treated us for years.
Indeed.
Anyone who at this point is ignorant is willfully so.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Douglas Murray. Finally, Stanley, you boasted about one of your sons being educated in China. Was all this apology shared by your other son, Boris Johnson, when he was a Prime Minister? Did he share your attitudes towards China?
No, I can't speak for Boris on this, but I'm perfectly sure that he, like any other sane person at this moment, does not want to get into this bidding up war of let's really drive China into a corner and so on.
So
and so forth. That's what we're seeing.
You're basically just going to appease them and just kowtow to them. Is that it? We have to wrap up. But you have to stand
kowtow
up
is a good
to
word. That's a good word. I know where it comes from.
We're going to have to have you back on this programme. We could spend a long time
I can see that you
about
were vexed by Heseltine.
Not at all. We're vexed by your position on China. That's what we're vexed by.
Stanley Johnson, thank you very much for coming in and sharing that with us. Next tonight, we'll talk to a former patient who's suing the NHS over gender reassignment surgery that he says he didn't need.
Passionate and always straight to the point. World-class broadcaster Vanessa Feltz is on TalkTV every night of the week. From politics to pop culture, there's no subject she shies away from. And remember,
if you're thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Join Vanessa Feltz on TalkTV every day from 4 p.m. He's back, and he's uncensored. Debating the breaking news and talking to the biggest names. Piers Morgan is live every week with a host of stars. Uncompromising, unmissable, and uncensored. And remember,
if you're thinking it, we're talking about it.
Piers Morgan Uncensored, Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on TalkTV.
We're leading Britain's conversation. Oh, no. With the People's Channel. No, already used. Every little helps. For God's sake, is nothing original anymore. It's finger-licking good. I'm loving it. Look, let's be honest. We don't have any fancy speechwriters here, but we do, and I promise you, discuss the issues that matter to you. Yes, I'm back. TalkTV, not with Morgan, just before him. Monday to Thursday at 7 p.m. Join me. Just do it. Well, that one too.
This is TalkTV.
Welcome back. The controversial clinic that pushed teenagers into changing their gender when they might actually have been gay or had autism. The Tavistock in North London is set to close this spring after an independent review said it risked harming those in its care. Now, a new book sheds further damning light on the clinic. In Time to Think, the writer Hannah Barnes says that medics ignored the fact that a huge 97% of children who were looking to change their sex were actually autistic or suffering from depression or other mental health problems that might have caused their unhappiness. Instead, doctors routinely referred under 16s for drugs to block the onset of puberty, with no idea of the long-term effects. Kids as young as 3 were sent to the clinic, and anyone who spoke out against it was demonised.
Well, joining us now is journalist and campaigner for sex-based human rights, Helen Joyce, Richie Herron, who's preparing to sue an NHS trust following his sex change, and in the studio, Paula Roan Adrienne is still with us. To start with, Helen, can we go to you, please? Can you just set the scene here? Because many people will not be familiar with the details and the extraordinary scandal that's emerged.
It really is a scandal, completely shocking. It's been clear to anyone who has paid attention for several years now that evidence was not properly used at this clinic. It wasn't run the way that other NHS services were. Ideology had taken over rather than proper medical practice and proper medical ethics and evidence. But yet, if you tried to say something about this, you got called transphobic, and you, for example, people would say you should lose your job. So it's so kudos to Hannah Barnes, a wonderful journalist, that she managed to get this book published. She used FOIs, she pushed through, she found a publishing deal when publishers tried to blacklist her, and she's got this book out now. And as I say, we've known for years that things weren't right, but now we've got chapter and verse. She's got it there in a book with all the evidence, amazing quotes from former patients, former clinicians, whistleblowers, and now it is written in black and white that this was not done properly. Children were not properly cared for.
And Helen, why has it taken so long? I mean, when we look back at it, you look at the extraordinary growth in numbers from something like 50 children a year being referred to thousands of children being referred. Why did it take so long? I mean, was it all about the money, the growth in revenue for the trust in question?
I'm sure that played a bit of a part, but I wouldn't say it was the main part. Sadly, this happens in medicine. We see medical scandals again and again, and what happens is that people who are inside a particular paradigm, who have a particular idea about how treatment should work, become completely obsessed with that, and they push it. They don't look for evidence. They demonise people who say that, hang on, you haven't got the evidence. And unfortunately, on this occasion, identity politics got involved too. So these children were seen, instead of being ill children or unwell children who needed help and had very complex problems. You mentioned autism. You mentioned that maybe they were going to grow up gay, so they face homophobia. There was child abuse, depression, self-harm, anorexia, all sorts. And instead they were seen as trans children.
Right.
And that meant that they had to be just affirmed. Absolutely shocking.
Yeah, well, I'd really like to bring in Richie Herron here, because I suppose when all's said and done, what really matters is not the politics of this, but the actual profound impact on patients and on children impacts that would be lifelong. And Richie, whilst you were not treated at the Tavistock, you have a very powerful story to tell, don't you, from your own experience of what can happen when young people are, as it were, rather rushed through this treatment. They are transitioned, they're put on puberty blockers. They may have second thoughts later. Can you tell us what happened to you?
Yeah, I found the gender affirmation approach to be a little bit of a slope that got steeper after every passing appointment. I am gay. I still have severe mental health issues, one of them being OCD, which they knew about before me going into the clinic. And all these issues were kind of explained away. And then when I eventually had the surgery, I was told that the reason that I regretted the surgery was because of those mental health issues, which before weren't related. So I was kind of like gaslit a lot on the way there, you know, and it felt very unfair. And to me, one of the reasons why I want to raise the alarm is it's terrible what's happened to children, and credit Hannah Bond, sorry,
Yes.
for
bringing
a
it to
wonderful
light.
book.
Yeah. Just by way of background with your story, am I correct that you were born male, then you thought you wanted to transition to female, you went through pretty brutal surgery, and then how long a period passed before you thought actually maybe that was a terrible mistake?
For the surgery itself, as soon as I was conscious, I knew it was a mistake, even before I knew it hadn't went well.
Really?
And then, yeah, after I realized how bad it was, it just got worse and worse. And then that brought into question a lot of my whole transition and why I individually wanted to transition. And it wasn't until like reality hit me that I was able to really think about the reasons why. And it was just too little too late, I'm afraid, for me.
So what is your situation now? Are you sort of at peace with where you are, or do you have more surgery to do? What's the next step for you, if there is one?
I think the lesson learned in this is that mental health problems can't be solved with hormones and scalpels.
Yeah.
And I'm reluctant to touch another scalpel unless it's to help fix what I currently have. For instance, I'm about to undergo a procedure that I'll have to have every 4 or 5 years for urethral dilation, because my urethra constantly gets constricted, which causes a lot of issues, pain and incontinence, and a lot of personal things I don't want to get too much into.
Of course.
I have.
Yeah. Of course. Paula, I think that Richie puts it so powerfully there, doesn't he? You know, a lot of people's mental health problems can't be fixed by hormones and scalpels. And the reality is that once you've gone down the hormones and scalpels route, there is no turning back.
And he's so right. And before we even get to the difficult issue about gender identity, and we look at the issue of mental health, and in particular the treatment of mental health issues with children, it is in a shocking state. An absolutely shocking state. And when you are a parent of a child who's suffering with mental health, you have very limited options in terms of where you can turn to for help. And what seems to have happened in relation to some of these children, particularly, we know that there's up to 1,000 cases that are going to be brought against the Tavistock in relation to treatment that was being received. Yeah. That it seems that issues in relation to their mental health just were not addressed, and the title, gender identity, was what was in focus.
Where was the safeguarding in this? I mean, I've been a governor with many of us being governors of schools. Safeguarding is absolutely foursquare at the centre of everything, including, as you say, mental health. And yet safeguarding seems here to have gone completely out of the window for some of the most vulnerable, anxious, depressed children, who are very often victims of bullying. I mean, I cannot believe, having been a governor of a normal school, how this could have got through.
Well, ultimately, remember, the treatment pathways lie with your medic, with your treating clinician, and that's where that duty and responsibility lies. And one of the things that I understand from having read the interim report is that they were just simply overwhelmed with the amount of patients that were being referred to them. They simply couldn't cope, and the systems weren't in place, the processes weren't in place to manage that overflow.
Yeah, well, I think it's important because we've been very critical here, just to give the Tavistock and the Portman NHS Trust a bit of a right of reply. They're the ones that run the Tavistock Centre for the NHS, and they say that the Gender Identity Development Service, often known as GIDS, worked on a case-by-case basis with every young person and their family, thoughtfully and holistically, with no expectation of what the right outcome for them might be. Concerns relating to young people's well-being are taken seriously and investigated. So that's their defence. I mean, Paul, are you speaking quite from the heart on this? Is this something that you've come across in your work as a family lawyer, or just something you've taken an interest in?
No, absolutely. In terms of children who are in the care system, in terms of children whose parents are unable to agree on where the child should live. It's incredibly hard for that child who unfortunately suffers emotionally and expresses that suffering through their mental health and will struggle with their mental health. For the parent being able to access help, it's practically
Really
non-existent.
If there's can we just bring in Richie before we wrap up on this? If we can bring Richie back. If there was one thing that you could change about the way young people who go to clinicians to seek their advice on these matters are treated, what would you change?
I think it's not just a one single issue.
Of course, I'm just looking for a quick hit here.
A quick hit. I would say more information about your background and motivations for trauma. A lot more work around trauma, I think, would be helpful
and perhaps
for a lot
more
of us.
time, because a lot of patients are saying actually they only needed a couple of consultations before they were prescribed this stuff.
Yeah, more time maybe, but I mean, for those who are like obsessed as I was to go down it, I don't know how much time would have helped. But maybe if they addressed the obsession itself, that would have been...
That's a really interesting point, isn't it?
Richie, thank you so much. Just before we have a chat, Helen, can I just bring you in one last time? I'm concerned that when GIDS closes, that these are going to be pushed out to regional centres in the country, and that these horrors, frankly, will continue.
This worries me too. At least with one clinic at GIDS, although it was a terrible clinic, it was the focus of everybody's attention, and campaigners could look in one place to see what was going wrong. We'll have to watch like hawks how these 4 regional centres are run and make sure that the ideologues don't come back in.
Indeed. Thank you very much to all of you on that debate. Really quite disturbing. I mean, I did think Richie made an important point about the obsession that young people develop. And, you know, the clinics themselves are on a lot of pressure to come up with a solution, aren't they?
Absolutely. Well,
on
a lighter note, yes, it's Valentine's Day, the most romantic day of the year. Here's my rose. Is that for you? We'll be looking at who's been paying the right price and who's been paying through the nose for one of those red, red roses.
Passionate and always straight to the point. World-class broadcaster Vanessa Feltz is on TalkTV every night of the week. From politics to pop culture, there's no subject she shies away from. And remember,
if you're thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Join Vanessa Feltz on TalkTV every day from 4 p.m. He's back, and he's uncensored. Debating the breaking news and talking to the biggest names. Piers Morgan is live every week with a host of stars. Uncompromising, unmissable, and uncensored. And remember,
if you're thinking it, we're talking about it.
Piers Morgan Uncensored, Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on TalkTV.
Britain's conversation. Oh no. With the People's Channel. No, already used. Every little helps. For God's sake, is nothing original anymore. It's finger-licking good. I'm loving it. Look, let's be honest. We don't have any fancy speechwriters here, but we do, and I promise you, discuss the issues that matter to you. Yes, I'm back. TalkTV, not with Morgan, just before him. Monday to Thursday at 7 p.m. Join me. Just do it. Well, that one too.
Well, coming up on The Talk, an energy firm sparks fury for sending staff on an all-expenses Maldives holiday as millions struggle to pay their bills back at home. And the cash-strapped Ministry of Defence is under fire for spending 30 grand a year on biscuits. And would you give up your seat for a child? Well, one mum has shamed commuters on TikTok for not doing that. All of that coming up at 9.
Welcome back. Well, Paula is still with us and Anne is back. And happy Valentine's Day to you both. Happy Valentine's Day to you too.
Thank you very much
I was
indeed.
actually a bit worried you were going to forget it.
Of course I wouldn't forget it. How could I forget it? I mean, I spent a fortune on roses.
I don't want to know how much you spent.
Well,
but while we're on the subject...
While we're on the subject of money, it turns out that actually you can spend a massive range. You can go from £5 at Tesco's.
Is that what you were going to do for me?
No, certainly not. £14 at Morrison's, £15 at M&S. If you go to Liverpool Street Station...
This is just for red roses.
This is just for red roses.
How many
have a guess, Anne. How many hundreds of pounds at Liverpool Street Station for a dozen red roses?
£3.
£3?
£3?
Oh, where's your generosity, Anne?
MP salary and double it.
Paula, how much at Liverpool Street Station for a dozen smart roses?
Posh ones.
Posh ones.
£150.
What's a posh rose?
Well, actually, since you asked...
You know, what is a posh rose?
Since you ask, I give you this rose, which was one of the 12 that this gorgeous man gave me. I believe he says it's a posh rose. I mean, I have no way of knowing. This is a high-end rose. You can get supermarket versions, which I don't think they're as good. But
mine was not a supermarket
differ.
version. But it does seem that we are a very romantic nation. Last year, despite the cost of living crisis, it turns out that almost £1.4 billion, Anne, was spent on Valentine's Day.
In the UK alone?
In the UK alone. That's a 15% increase on the previous year. Were you part of that spending power?
I certainly wasn't part of that spending power, no. And that, quite honestly, it hasn't even got any cent. I mean, I'd cheerfully send that...
say that. I gave that to... What?
I was going to say I'd cheerfully send it to Giva Hofstadt.
Well, maybe we'll need to do that. Well, look, Richard's very romantic. We know this because he's even written a poem for Valentine's Day.
Oh, wow.
Oh, spare us.
Come on, Richard,
well,
come on.
I mean, obviously, I'm not going to recite your poem.
Spare us.
Go on, then.
Oh, dear. Well, I put this on Twitter. Roses are red, violets are blue. It's great being free outside the EU. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I like that.
Exactly.
Isabel, you're a lucky woman. That's all I can say.
Are you?
What do you mean?
I mean,
talking of embarrassing...
He didn't warn me he was going to do that, by the way. Otherwise, I'd have stopped him. That is so cheesy.
Or, actually, talking of embarrassing, we did come especially early this evening in order to open the multiple cards and roses that we thought Piers would have. But it turns out,
that there were,
sorry, Piers,
there were no bunches of flowers
zip,
in here.
absolutely niente.
So, Anne, is it fair to say that you're not a fan of Valentine's Day and you don't celebrate it?
I certainly don't celebrate.
Got your red dress on.
I certainly don't. Yes, I know, by accident. I certainly don't celebrate Valentine's Day, but I'm always pleased for British business. And if people want to go and spend their money on rot, that's fine.
What did you get, Paula? What did you get?
Still waiting, it sounds like.
Yeah,
are you serious?
Yes, exactly. No doubt it'll be there waiting for me when I get home. I've been in Luton all day.
Otherwise, he's coming in this studio to explain.
There'll be trouble.
I'm sure.
She said she's been in Luton all day. I think
Yeah.
she deserves something pretty good.
You absolutely deserve it.
But you say you don't celebrate Valentine's Day, but do you celebrate love?
No.
And I think that's the end of the show, right? Anne, come on.
But Anne, the great thing is you're happy that actually, in terms of business, British corporates,
I'm very happy.
it's growing, that's
people
going
do
well.
what they want to do. If they want to celebrate, what is it you said? Celebrate
love.
love. If they want to celebrate Valentine's Day, if they want to celebrate anything at all, and they want to go out and they want to spend their money, that's good for the economy. So bang on.
But you're not joining in the gang.
It's broadening, though, isn't it, Valentine's Day? I think it's getting bigger, and it's not just about romantic love now. You can get cards for all sorts, can't
exactly.
you? And I think
Yeah, you know, it's good to, you know, it's about children, it's about your gal Valentine's.
Did your children remind your partner to do the Valentine's Day thing?
They
That's
did.
Mother's Day, for goodness sake. That's Mother's Day.
You can get belated. I mean, you can
That's
extend it
Valentine's
over a
Day.
week and have sort of, you know,
So we can have another one tomorrow.
Well, we can have a later dinner. I mean,
more flowers are coming
More
my
flowers
way,
are coming.
hopefully. Posh ones, high end.
I do think, like, on a serious note, I do think it's really important to celebrate love. I'm not surprised that the figure has increased since last year. Remember, we were just coming out of the last horrid lockdown. We've got to be able to express ourselves.
We're feeling the love here. We're feeling the love. Well, look,
Brilliant.
that is it from us.
Fantastic.
We're feeling all sweet and lovely. Whatever you're doing, make sure it's uncensored. Good night.
Good night.
Passionate and always straight to the point. World-class broadcaster Vanessa Feltz is on TalkTV every night of the week. From politics to pop culture, there's no subject she shies away from. And remember,
if you're thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Join Vanessa Feltz on TalkTV every day from 4 p.m. He's back, and he's uncensored. Debating the breaking news and talking to the biggest names. Piers Morgan is live every week with a host of stars. Uncompromising, unmissable, and uncensored. And remember,
if you're thinking it, we're talking about it.
Piers Morgan